Hello, everybody, and welcome. Today, we're going to tackle a question I get all of the time and see all over the place. What is the Buddhist Bible? Well, the answer is the Pali Canon, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. Most religions have a go to book. With Christianity, you have the Bible, of course. With Islam, you have the Quran. But with Buddhism, well, it's a little bit more complicated. It's the Pali Canon. But what does that mean? Well, the Pali Canon is a collection of teachings by the Buddha and his close associates, and kind of the people in early Buddhism that created the core teachings of what Buddhism now stands for and studies today. But the problem being is that the Pali Canon would make a book like War and Peace look like a footnote. In terms of length, the Pali Canon is about 10 Bibles long, if not longer, if we're including all of the countless commentary, but let's not get started or stuck on the commentary today. It originated from the Buddha and his close associates around 400 or 500 BCE, with some things being added later and some things being amended and changed. The canon itself was preserved in the language of Pali, being an oral tradition for hundreds of years before it was written down. Thus, the title, the Pali Canon. The Pali Canon is organized into three baskets, or collections of knowledge, being the Vinaya-Pitaka, the Sutta-Pitaka, and the Abhidhamapitaka. The Vinaya-Pitaka, which is canonically the first of these texts, generally speaking, is all about the rules and regulations of the monastic community, or how to be a monk or nun 101 in a way. It is kind of the textual framework which the entire monastic Buddhist community is built on. It not only includes the rules of how to be a monk or a nun, but also a host of other procedures and conventions of etiquette that supports the monastic community, as well as the relationship that monks and nuns should have with the public at large who are not a monk or a nun. The Vinaya Pitaka kind of acts as a guiding compass for monks and nuns, guiding them on the path to awakening or just how to live more virtuous and moral lives within their context or their setting. I would say that of the three collections, the Vinaya Pitaka is probably the least studied outside of the Buddhist monastic community. That's because I guess you don't read a rule book unless you are vastly and incredibly or obsessively interested in something, or, you are a part of that community. So we can see why it's probably the least studied of the three. The second collection of discourses is called the Sutta Pitaka, or the Sutra collection. It is loaded with discourses. Think it as the transcript of the best hits, teachings, and sermons of the Buddha and his close associates. It consists of about 10,000-ish sutras delivered by the Buddha and his close associates during and shortly after the Buddha's 45 years of teaching. The Sutta Pitaka itself is actually broken down into 5 more sections because it consists of such a large volume of liturgy and literature and teachings. It's broken down into more refined sections. Those are the Digha Nikaya, which is the long discourses, which consists of kind of generally more longer and more elaborate suttas of the Buddha, and all of these cover a wide range of philosophical topics and stories, but some more than others in some instances. The second is the Majjhima Nikaya, sometimes called the middle-length suttas, which consists of 152 sutras and offers, I think, the widest array of blend of sutras, teachings, stories, and philosophical discourses given by the Buddha and his close associates. This one is definitely the most studied of all of the Buddhist Pali Canon, simply because it covers the widest ground, and in general, I think is probably the most readable if you were to just read it outright. The third is called the Samyutta Nikaya, or the connected discourses. These are organized thematically rather than chronologically. This Nikaya consists of about 2,900 suttas, and its teachings are grouped together based off of the teaching of interconnectedness, showing how each of the teachings of the Buddha and his close associates during this time interwove the Dhamma or the Dharma together and how they were all connected. The fourth Nikaya is the Anguttara Nikaya, or the numerical discourses. It goes off of basically like the story of ones, the selection of twos, the selections of threes, the selections of fours, and it consists of about 11,539 suttas. And this is where we get the whole Buddhists love lists thing, because this one is made up of all kinds of lists. This is where you'll see the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and a myriad of other things taught in that list formula. The fifth and final Nikaya of the Sutta Pitaka is known as the Khuddaka Nikaya, which is often referred to as the minor collection or the miscellaneous collection. It is kind of where they put everything else that didn't seem to fit into any of the other Nikayas within the Sutta Pitaka. So you get a really large array. You get things like the Dhammapada, you get things like the Jataka tales, which is stories of the Buddha's past lives, as well as the verses of male and female awakened beings or arhats of the Buddha's time. So it is the miscellaneous drawer of the Pali Canon, and particularly the Sutta Pitaka in a way. And the last basket, or collection of teachings, is the Abhidhamapitaka, which is considered to be the most advanced and philosophical of all of the Buddha's early teachings. The Abhidhamapitaka delves into the profound and systematic analysis of the Buddha's teachings, offering a detailed examination of the nature of reality and the workings of the mind. If we wanted to think about it in a more of a modern way, we might think of it as the PhD of Buddhism. It is incredibly fine, incredibly detailed, and at times incredibly complicated, and really only used by very, very high-level meditation practitioners or Buddhist philosophical students. This collection, the Abhidhamapitaka, is not given in the normal discourse format that the others would be given in, not told through stories, just kind of laid out for you. But rather, it kind of comprises a series of intricate texts and analyses that are going on between the monks and nuns of the Buddha's time and after the Buddha's death. What the Abhidhamapitaka is attempting to teach or attempt to do is provide a comprehensive framework for the fundamental principles and underlying structures that govern our human experience and the universe, and explain it in very fine detail of how we interact and interface with reality as it presents itself to us, depending on our nature and level of perspective with which we are approaching that reality. I know it gets very, very complicated very, very quickly. It's an incredible text to study if you are at that point, and even something fun to look at if you see it on a bookshelf somewhere. But just know that it's kind of the PhD of this Pali Canon. These three collections provide the core or Bible of the early Buddhist teachings. However, depending on your tradition of Buddhism, which there are Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, your particular tradition might have a greater focus on other areas, be it the Heart Sutra, the Prajnaparamita Sutras, or the Platform Sutra, depending on what culture you're coming from or studying and what tradition you're coming from and studying. There also might be an entirely different framework. Something important to understand in all of this, though, is no matter the tradition that you're coming from, all of them do respect the authenticity and kind of veracity of these early teachings, regardless of whether or not they are their main focus. They still respect them as the foundation of their tradition as a whole, which is very important. And while this may seem like a lot, it isn't necessary to have read all of this and understand all of this to say that you know Buddhism. I mean, even I don't really know anybody who has read the entire Pali Canon. I'm sure there are people out there who have, much less people that have spent the time and years, if not decades of study needed to really get into the meat and bones of these teachings as a whole. And if you don't ever do that, that's perfectly okay. So you might be asking yourself at this point, where would be a good place to start if I'm interested in this kind of material or just want to have a better understanding of what Buddhism is actually getting at? Well, I have two suggestions for you. The first is a book called The Noble Eightfold Way, which is a short little 200-page long book that goes over the absolute core and fundamental teachings of Buddhism through the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path by Bhikkhu Bodhi, and you'll find a link in the description below for it. And the other one is a book called In the Buddha's Words, which is a bit longer, but if you are interested in the direct suttas and sutras, or what the Buddha was saying in those contexts, instead of more of a commentary style, it will provide that. And it is also by Bhikkhu Bodhi, and you'll also find the link in the description for this particular text. So I hope this answers your question of what is the Buddhist Bible. I know it's a little convoluted and complicated in general, but sometimes that's just the way things are, and we gotta roll with it when we experience it. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to submit them in the comments section below, and I will answer them to the best of my ability, or point you to someone that I think would answer them better than I can. As well, if you enjoyed this, please consider liking and subscribing so you can get updates when I release more content like this. And if you're interested in taking a deeper dive into Buddhist meditation, philosophy, history, or just self-reflection and self-improvement in general, please consider joining my email list at my website, silasday.com, link down in the description, for when I'll be releasing my Teachable website and going really in-depth into a lot of these topics for all of you curious people out there. Regardless, thank you all so much for being here. I'm Silas Day, and have a great day.